All right, hey everyone, welcome back to the Investor's Guide to Joy. My name is Paul Graham, and today I have Erin Bradley on the show, who found me through the GoBundance community, which is an amazing community. We'll probably talk about it. Erin, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I'm really excited to share some space here on the show with you.
Yeah, and for people who have been in Colorado or lived in Colorado, this is also, a special one. Something, I miss, but go back every now and again. So love, just environment and the experience of it. I really found that Colorado was a beautiful awareness to life. And so what I mean by that is, I don't know if you found this way, but when I lived in Colorado, people would come and be like, the mountains are so amazing. Like, you're so lucky to live here. And it's like, yeah, they're cool, right? I personally give the Rocky Mountains like my, third favorite mountain. My first favorite mountain range are actually the Andes Mountain, because they're so big and so majestic. So that gets spot one and two. But, curious to have you kind of start us off on this idea of, just being like aware of like the good things in your life or kind of around it, because you've had like a number of good experiences that have happened, to you, and that sort of perspective of it.
Well, it's interesting that you say that about how people will be like, oh my God, it's so amazing. And you're like, yeah, it's okay. I'm the opposite because I grew up in Philadelphia
Okay.
and I came to Colorado on a whim to Denver in the summer of 2005 with my then boyfriend, now husband, and one of my sisters to open a bar for our other sister's husband. It was supposed to be 3 months to recruit, hire, train, and promote and get the bar open. And we never left. And it's interesting because I just did a post about this the other day about the power of daydreaming, because the first time I came to Colorado, I was in 8th grade. Actually, that's not true. I skied Vail once in 5th grade, but I remember being in 8th grade and falling in love with being in nature, hiking by a river, playing in the river, 13, 14 years old, and thinking to myself, I love it here. And then on a road trip in 2001, my sister was moving to San Francisco from Philadelphia, and we stopped in Denver. And I remember thinking, I could do this. I could live in this place. It's pretty cool. And it wasn't until 2005 that we had this opportunity to come for the summer, and, we never left. And so there's a saying around how something in your now reality was once just an idea or a dream, and how quickly we forget. And
Yeah.
it's powerful because when you're in a moment of a daydream, even a pipe dream, we often shut down that dream or that wish that comes out of our heart with our heads needing to know how it's going to work out, or that it's going to be realistic or probable or what responsible or whatever. And so the irony is that we end up getting here in '05 and we fell in love with being here. And my husband and I love to camp. He's not even a skier, but we love to camp. We love to be in the mountains. I love being by lakes, on lakes, near rivers, whatever, on hiking trails, biking trails, whatever. And we ended up talking about how are we going to make it happen someday. Well, in the fall of 2015, we bought a condo in the mountains and in a little ski town called Winter Park. And our son was in kindergarten at the time. And we were here every weekend. We thought we were going to buy it and Airbnb it, but we were using it all the time. So I remember we went out to dinner in Denver, and we were talking about how someday, right, it would be great to live full time in the mountains. Maybe when the kids graduate high school, we'll live there full time. And with the oldest being in kindergarten, it's like, there's no guarantees. We don't even know if we'll be alive in 14 years, let alone in good health. And so at first it was like, we can't go now because of X, Y, and Z. And I always say can't is the same as saying won't, because can't is like saying I'm not willing to try to figure it out. And so we were like, why not now? So we went through all the worst case scenarios and we ended up moving to the ski town. And that was 8 years ago in the summer of 2016. And I got to tell you, Paul, I thank the heavens, the universe, whatever, every single day. I mean, every single day I'm out on those trails. I'm hiking, I'm mountain biking, I'm skiing, hiking up the mountain at sunrise, whatever. And I still can't believe this is my real life. Like, the backdrop to my kids' soccer games is these snow-capped mountains. And I'm just like pinching myself that this is my reality. And so it's interesting because when you look back to all the times that you found yourself in fear of taking a risk or making a leap or, moving like you have done, and your brain wants to activate with all the fear and worst case scenario, and then you do it anyway, and you look back and you're like, hell yes, this is awesome. So I love it. Although I do agree the Andes are pretty spectacular. I went to Machu Picchu and it blew
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw them when I was in Chile, and just, so I've not like been on them of sorts, just, saw them, but still just this concept of there's something like bigger than yourself and like greater things out there. It's also brought on this idea because like I love with where you're at and like what you're thinking, because I've, have the same thing. Like I've been very much like a vision casting like type of individual. If you look at I think it's rocket fuel that has the integrator versus visionary like test, right? Like I'm an 82 integrator and 75 visionary. So it's a fascinating combo of like I can basically spin my wheels and get nothing done, but I could talk a big game. Because I know myself, I've then recognized like, hey, whoa, I'd love to, do this or like travel abroad or live abroad or, move to Colorado, do these things. I can share a story of me in Costa Rica of some things like I've uncovered because I'm curious if you like felt the same. But I'm curious for this moment, like, do you feel or have you thought that you could dream like too like far or like too much where it's like, hey, I have maybe $2 in my pocket, but one day like I'd like to have that house and a car, in my like living room kind of thing. And it's just like completely like delusional because I found that there's sometimes like anxiety around it. So maybe it's not a like don't dream or can't dream like to those big crazy, I don't know how they're going to happen, but it's just not having anxiety around it, or like is there a way to control that like desire, or what comes to mind for you, or what do you believe?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I'm laughing because you talk about dreaming too big. I have been guilty of doing what they say, go too far too fast, because if I'm in the room with somebody that's doing something cool, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to grab life big and say yes to all the things.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, I'm definitely more of a risk taker. And as an investor, not every one works out. And so one of the interesting things is if you have an experience of maybe you feel like you went too far too fast, or I jumped in the Airbnb game, out of state investing in spots that were booming, but in hindsight we kind of caught the tail end of those waves, and so we had some underperforming short-term rentals that we ended up offloading. And I notice now how it can have almost a negative impact, because it's like, man, did I dream too big? Did I go too far too fast? And I had a personality profile test one time. I don't remember which one it was or what the attribute was, but in the explanation of the attribute, it said naively optimistic. And I laughed so hard because I'm like, that is 100% me, naively optimistic. But, to your point, when you talked about the $2 in your pocket, dreaming of a big house one day, I was in 2008, I'd gone 100% commission in the mortgage business in 07 and fell flat on my face, like no confidence in sales, absolute fear of being seen as salesy, terrified of what, people think of me, and the antiquated sales strategies were just super dreadful for me. And I fell flat on my face. And by the summer of 2008, I was riding my bike to a client meeting because I didn't have enough money for gas. And I tried to get there early so that the sweat would dry off before I met the guy, and tried to figure out what to wear on a bike that I could look professional and not, and also be able to ride a bike. So, and it was July, so it was super hot. Anyway, I got there early, and then the guy got there early as well. And he introduced himself to me right as my credit card was being declined for a $2 cup of coffee. So talk about $2 in your pocket. I couldn't even get $2 approved on a credit card. And the worst part was I thought that was the card that would work. I honestly got all my credit cards were maxed. I was probably 35 grand in credit card debt. Yeah. And I was like desperate for this client to become a paycheck, and it was just so embarrassing. I didn't want to try another card. So I just lied and said, that's so weird. It's my debit card. I'm going to have to call the bank and see what's going on. And he bought my coffee and I was mortified. So point being, yes, I've been there with not even $2 in my pocket, dreaming someday world domination, and if you continue to give yourself permission to dream, even though you have no clue how, and you're willing to drop the pin in the GPS to the destination, before you know where the path is going to be, you'll get there eventually. Time's going to pass. You might as well dream, because it doesn't matter how long it takes to accomplish your goals. The time's passing anyway. So you might as well dream,
Yeah, absolutely. What can you expand on like that moment or maybe like similar moments? Because oftentimes I think like when we look at like movies, it's like, hey, here's this trial. They do some stuff, scene cut, scene cut, scene cut. Okay, now they make it, right? Like I think of like, Pursuit of Happiness, right? And just those scenes, you're like, oh man, that one night probably really sucked. It's like that was probably, months, right? Or maybe a year or something like that. So in what way did you find like that experience, rewarding, reflecting, what have you, like for the future, maybe in terms of like money mindset, in terms of, tactical, in terms of like permission? Did you give yourself like more permission in some of those situations, or were you kind of like clung to only what you could like see immediately because you didn't have the money? You were like, well, I can't give myself permission, like kind of thing. What was some of those like money or mindset sort of perspectives you had in some of those moments?
Well, the first thing I did was I called my dad for advice, and he had gone 100% commission as stockbroker, financial advisor back in his 20s. So I remember asking him, how did you do this? This is so freaking hard. Like, this is
Yeah.
so much harder than I thought it was going to be. And he agreed. He said, you're right. And there's a reason why some people in the sales industry and any industry can earn at a higher level than what you think traditional doctors, lawyers, whatever. And it's because it is really, really hard. And he's like, do you think you're gonna be good at this someday? And I said, yeah, I think I could be. And then he said, then you're gonna have to do whatever it takes. And I remember opening another credit card and I hired my first coach. And so what I learned in that moment of getting coached is that, number one, today in 2024, as we're recording this, it's been 16 years, I guess, since, no, 14 years since this fateful moment, right? And I've never been without a coach since then. And what I've learned is that whether I'm being coached or I'm coaching someone else, we all have a limitation to what we can see or believe. And a lot of people are afraid to begin a journey or to continue a journey because they can't see the finish line from where they are. And there's a quote by Martin Luther King where he says, you don't need to see the entire staircase to take the first step. And Steve Jobs talks about how you don't need to connect all the dots moving forward. You just need to begin. And then once you've begun, you'll be able to look back and see how the dots connected. And there's just a lot of analogies like that. And I remember feeling like the coach could see in me potential that I sometimes couldn't see in myself. And there's a saying that sometimes you have to borrow the light you see in others, and sometimes you borrow the light they see in you. And so my biggest takeaway or piece of advice for anyone listening is just never go it alone, because we're always going to be limited. We're always going to have that darkness that's just a little bit further than the headlights can shine in the evening. And it's like, it's going to make it scary because we can't see the finish line. And that is really tough for our fear-based analytical brains to deal with. So we've got to be hanging around people that remind us of our future. You talked about you're in Emerge, you talked about Go Abundance. And what I found is that when I put myself in the room with people that remind me of my future, it inspires me to dream because I see what's possible in them. And I believe that the only difference between us and someone living the life we want is their decision to do it. And to your point, you can't see all the trial and error and falling down and getting up between their chapter 1 and the chapter 10 you're admiring. And so if you're on chapter 2 and you want to get there, I say hang around them and learn from their mistakes, and you might get to their chapter 10 by your chapter 4. And it's incredible how fast you can start to activate and to change your beliefs and to see the light in others and see the light they see in you. And then to start to increase that velocity of momentum that starts to take you to your dreams way faster than you could ever imagine possible. And I just think we limit ourselves by operating as an island. And we need to either seek out coaches or mentors or masterminds, communities to elevate by association. And it's really powerful. So, I mean, ever since then, I've always had a coach in different arenas and sometimes multiple coaches that are helping me move past a sticking point. There's always something blocked because we're humans and we have fear. And there's nothing you can do about that other than acknowledge it and figure out how to work with it and through it and around it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, leverage credit card debt is a beautiful thing that I've, found and managed and, kept, up with and have, hedged. It helped me furnish 2 short-term rentals, 6,000 square feet, of property, right? And has allowed me to do, the trips or coaching or, things like that. It reminds me of a time where at one point I was not even hesitant or resistant, but was like combative with a career coach when I was in W-2 land for $50 for an hour to, help me. Right. And I was like, they're 50, like, what? Like I, at that time, like, was almost making that. And I was like, why would I give you and like, just what? No, it makes no sense. Right. Well, interestingly enough, I doubled my W-2 income in 4 years. And so, can you talk about, especially because, for yourself, like as a coach and what have you, like this concept of like what I shared for my story, because there's a number of people out there. And I love sharing that story because it's like now I'll pay thousands for a weekend or even a day just to be around some sort of, people or, experience or, course or program like type thing. Like, is it giving ourselves permission? Like, I'm almost thinking very tactically. I'm an analytical person. So I love when you keep saying the analytical piece. That's my strengths finder, like top thing is being analytical. And so dreaming is also fun because it gets me out of that analytical state. Is it like tactical things to, kind of live in your almost, I'm thinking like future self, right? Like, hey, I need that coach, but like, I don't have the money and I can't open the credit card. Like, okay, then just, you figured out like other ways. Just curious what you've seen for maybe yourself or even maybe some people you've coached or kind of been around.
I just think that if you want to move to higher levels in your life in any capacity that interests you, right? That could be professionally, financially, health related, et cetera. You've got to be willing to invest in yourself. I mean, I remember almost going to grad school after undergrad to get an MBA. And had I done that, I probably would have had six-figure student loan debt to learn some skill to take me into the business world. And I took a roundabout way into entrepreneurship, which started with me graduating from Boston College and getting a job at Outback Steakhouse because I wanted to fund my travels. Yeah. Much to my parents' chagrin, I'm the youngest of five kids, and everybody else went and got a good college degree and then went straight into corporate America in the Northeast. And I decided to carve my own path and worked at Outback and then kayaked the coast of Mexico for a month and then moved to Barcelona for 2 years and did all these crazy adventures, went on safari, climbed the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, and, free spirit, footloose and fancy free, but financially destitute. Okay. And so when I came into the mortgage world and I fell into it, I had no safety net. I had no money. I had no plan to be successful. And I just ended up, like I said, falling flat on my face. So that's when I hired my first coach. And now in hindsight, I feel like whatever it cost me, in fact, I'm considering hiring somebody right now for a 3-month project and it's going to be $15,000. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, $5,000 a month sounds like a lot of money theoretically. But if that $15,000 can help me increase my revenue by $100,000, then it actually doesn't cost me $15,000 to hire this person. It cost me $85,000 not to. It's the same thing with coaches and everything else, is that the coach that gave me, the guidance from roughly 2008 till 2010 helped me take my income from 23,000 to 180,000. So let's say it cost me $6,000 a year, or it cost me $12,000 over 2 years, right? $500 a month. Yeah. So if it cost me $12,000 over 2 years, but it helped me then in the third year make $180,000 in my third year, it didn't cost me $12,000. It cost me $168,000 to not hire that person to help me unlock the belief within me and move past the blocks that I had in myself. So it's the same thing if you want to hire help in your business. Like, you want to hire a virtual assistant that's going to help you with your marketing and it's going to ultimately drive revenue and it's going to cost you $400 and it's going to get you another client. That client's going to bring in $3,000 in revenue. Then it's not costing you $400. It's costing you $2,600 not to. So there's an opportunity cost to not investing in yourself. And it comes back to those limitations that we all have as human beings. And it's really difficult to move through and around the blocks that we have without some support and somebody seeing in us a truth that we can't see because of the lies that our brains tell us, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a number of great, points there and just kind of processing all them. Has there been like a big takeaway of sorts, or maybe not biggest, but like what's been like your favorite coaching moment, like sort of thing that you found maybe over the years?
Well, it kind of comes back to when we bought the condo in 2015. My coach at the time asked me what my big vision was. And I said that we had a 10-year goal of having a place in the mountains. And like I said, our older kid was in kindergarten and he was like, why not now? And I was like, I don't know, actually, I didn't think about that. Why not now? So we figured it out. And then it turns out it happened within 2 months. And then fast forward to the spring of 2016. And I told him about the time that my husband and I were having dinner. You probably know the restaurant Sushi Den in Denver. So we were there in Wash Park and we were talking about this pipe dream of living there full time. And my coach was like, why not now? And I was like, well, I can't because fill in the blanks. Well, everything that follows fill in the blanks is your fear, right? If I say I can't do that because there's a story, the question is the story true? So we went through all the reasons we theoretically can't. And we figured out that our worst case scenario was we move back to where we live right now. So we put our house in Denver on short-term rental when it was still allowed back then in 2016. We moved into our little 70s time capsule condo in the mountains, theoretically for the summer. And that one property that we had several in Denver, started bringing in like 7,000, 8,000 a month in short-term rental income. And it was more than my husband's property management income. So at a job he had. So I said, well, this is stupid. Quit your job. Who cares? Let's go live the life of our dreams. And so we retired him in 2016 and proved once again that, why not now kind of thing. And so that kind of went on where we kept on doing more ridiculous things. I thought that was going to ruin my business because I lived in Denver and I had a mortgage business down there. But it ended up doubling our business because I opened an office in Winter Park and then I met a lot of clients on the ski lift. So it was great. And then in 2020, we went on a 6-month RV road trip and homeschooled our kids during COVID instead of being in and out of the classroom. And so that was another, it's a pipe dream, but here's all the reasons why we shouldn't do this right now and why it's not responsible and why it's going to like put me out of business probably. And the business ended up having a 50% increase in business while we were on the road. I think people are drawn to the idea of people living their life and following their dreams and following their heart. I think there's something about that. So what I thought was going to compromise my business, because I thought people were going to assume I was checked out on this road trip, ended up increasing. So again, it's just like time and time again, you're on the brink of a decision that feels scary or terrifying. And then you do it anyway, and it turns out to be your best decision. So just the other day, I was talking to a coaching client who was telling me one of his pipe dreams is it's a 5-year plan. And I was like, why not now? I mean, you can do it now. What's the worst case scenario?
Yeah, it's been, loving the things you're saying, because there's a number of things that are coming up. But yeah, I mean, that's been another thing I've found where it's like, it's great to have those 3 to 5 year vision. It's also like, how could that be done in like a year, right? There's also then that quote of like, you can accomplish more like in, I think it's like a decade that you think you can in a year, like tough. So there is like some sort of, perspective piece. But to your point, like I've even looked at for my brand of like buying a newsletter, buying a done for you, like digital agency or something like that, or like just all these like different things where it's like, do I have to go and shake every single person's hand to build a newsletter? Or can I talk to amazing people who have amazing audiences where there is overlap and we share, common interests and do this and do that? And it's almost like a yes and sort of piece. Mm-hmm. And you don't know how it's going to uncover. One thing you helped me think of earlier is this, concept that I've really found to be true, where the most magical, amazing, incredible things in my life have been unexpected.
Yes.
And so even though I desire to be like, all right, Excel spreadsheet, like la da 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 da, what does that then mean or have? And for myself, it's not leaning on my understanding, but it's trusting that the right things will work out in the right ways. And I'll always have everything I need. I may desire to have the net worth or the cash flow or whatever thing or experience or whatnot. It may not be able to be right then, but certainly to your point, like giving yourself permission to going for it, trying it, figure it out. You never know like what, how it could uncover, right? Has just been an incredible, beautiful thing. It also reminded me when going back to like coaching, this concept that, I have when I talk to, clients or just people in general in the coaching space is you can't unlearn the things that you learn. So again, very analytical. Hey, it costs $5,000 a month. I have to get it within this amount of time, things like that, for the next 5, 50 years, whatever, right? Like you can't unlearn those things. And I found that like those compounding things, it's almost to the effect of like, would you pay 32 cents every day for the rest of your life for the information that you learned that gave you the skills, knowledge, or resources to create your ideal life, or, through either action or experience or something like that? It's been just like so profound. So it's then almost like, how much do you believe your future life is like worth, and how much would you like pay for it with what you like currently have or what, you'll have in the future? Same thing I deal with like health too, of like, when you're on the hospital bed, like you don't focus on how much money you have. You're focused on, again, like experiences and the fact that you're healthy and whatnot. And so, yeah, just great points to think about that. Yeah, you reminded me of that. I think not just think more people should like recognize, but I really hope that people not just like hear, but also like understand. And it's also a good darn reminder for myself too, in some situations, to be that like naively optimistic and like a little bit delusional, but also not be, at least from my perspective, like completely delusional. Do you have a like again, I use systems and processes of like a buy box, right? Here's my risk tolerance. Do you have like a delusion tolerance almost of like, hey, this is too much. I'm too optimistic, about something, whether it be like business related or like dreaming related kind of a thing? Or is it not like as systematized for you, or what does that look like?
No, I would say I'm not analytical would not be one of my attributes.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
and everything continues to work out in spite
Perfect.
of the fact that, like you said, most of the best things in my life were unscripted. And I always tell my clients that when you look back on some of the favorite relationships you've developed in the last year or two, and some of the relationships you've deepened, some of the opportunities that have come your way, it's kind of incredible to see that the majority of them were actually not premeditated by you.
Mm.
Like stars align and paths cross at the right time for an opportunity to present itself. And so if you're in tune with that, then you can be curious to see what unfolds for you instead of fearing the unknown. You can kind of revel in it because it gets a little fun to see how many random things will happen. Like I often say to myself, I'm curious what life has in store for me today. And
Okay.
then I try to pay close attention to the day. And I write about it at night and I write about it in the morning. Like who randomly reached out to me on LinkedIn, or who did I bump into at the grocery store today? And what kind of interesting conversation did I have? And
Yeah.
was there a takeaway? Was there something I genuinely believe nothing is random and that it's all very unscripted. But if you let it unfold without gripping on to what it's supposed to look like and being so, so controlling of the outcome or needing it to be a certain way before you give yourself permission to be okay, it's so much more fun and so much faster to see what kinds of fun opportunities present themselves. Whereas I feel like when you're kind of gripping on to a particular outcome or a particular way it needs to go for you to feel like it went right, it's kind of like clinging to the bank of the river. You're hanging on tight here where it's safe and you feel secure and it's scary to let go and you don't know what's downstream. So you're better off just staying right here and hanging on tight and gripping. And it's not that comfortable to stay put. Like it's eventually your arms get tired, your hands get sore, and you're not that comfortable, but you feel like this is the more comfortable place to be than letting go. But when you do release and you go downstream and around the bend, that's where all those new relationships are waiting for you and the doors are opening and the miracles are happening. And I genuinely feel like it's just the difference between paddling upstream and getting on the raft and enjoying the ride. We're not here
Yeah.
for that long, so might as well have fun with it.
Yeah, yeah, you bet. And I love the fact that you've actually like done some of those things. Analogies are great, but I can only imagine you, yeah, doing those kind of activities too. And certainly it's this kind of idea of like living your, ideal life and designing your life and, things like that. We've talked a little bit about permission. One thing I found is I was in Costa Rica for a month. I had 16 people come out with me and got this big 8-bedroom house and just said, hey, when could you come? I found that people tend to not do things because one, they don't give themselves permission, logistics, and then also like finances. As you have coached and as you think about, knowing your ideal life and then like, living it, even though it may not be like to the nth degree that you could desire, right? But just living it with what you have and what you want to do. Like, what does that look like? Is there, advice or things that you talk to or, share for people to kind of bring that future today?
Yeah. So I spend a lot of time first thing in the morning before I give my attention and energy and emotion away to the external world and the agendas of other people that I, live within my home or even serve professionally or whatever. Is
Sure.
I just take as much time as necessary to focus on awakening my mind and my heart and soul with ease, not with technology and not with overthinking. Like my brain wants to think. My brain wants to like get up and go and get doing and know what we have to get done today because there's a lot to do. And I mean, I'm a fast-paced person. So
Right.
it takes work to slow that roll and to tap into the silence because I think creativity and new ideas are born very easily out of stillness, but not very easily accessed in busyness. And in that quiet time, I often do an activity where I write, it's today's date a year from now. So we're recording this on August 29th, 2024. I'll write, it's August 29th, 2025, and I'm celebrating ... And there's something that happens in the early morning where you're just kind of uninhibited because you're not fully awake yet. So
Yep.
it's kind of like you're somewhere between dream state and awake state. And whatever comes out from that flow, it can be completely random. And it's crazy what happens. Like one time I was on a plane to Mexico in October of 21, and it was like, it's October 21st, 2021 or 2022. and I'm celebrating dot, dot, dot. And I wrote beach house question mark. And I was on my way to a conference and I was talking to all these people about how a friend of mine had bought an Airbnb on South Padre Island, Texas, and how my husband and kids and I were thinking about pulling out of school for 5 weeks and driving down to see our friends at their Airbnb and check out South Padre Island. Like we've never been there before. So some people lived in Houston, some were in Austin, some were in Dallas. And I was like, maybe we'll zigzag and see you on the way down. Well, I got back from that conference and 4 days later, my buddy who had a place on South Padre called me with an off-market deal across the street from his place. And we ended up buying it. We bought a place we had never seen in a location we had nenever been. And we did end up going down there for 5 weeks in February of 2022, but we were going to set up the 4 units that we bought. The point is that the ideal, right? The vision, the dream, it evolves because you're evolving and your priorities are evolving. So even the dream isn't a fixed thing. So when I was on that plane saying it's October 21st, 2022, and we're celebrating beach house question mark, I didn't know where, I didn't know how, I didn't even know the plan financially of what it would look like.
Yeah.
And within, 6 months, we're at a property we own in a place we've never been, setting it up. It's just like everything is possible if you give yourself permission to dream. So that's an activity that I always do. It's this day, a year from now, or 5 years from now, and I'm celebrating and just see what comes up. What do you want to celebrate?
Do you also like meditate and like think on it? My mind is just like, oh yeah, for sure. In a year, I'm going to do blah. Cool, sick. Okay, now I'm going to go do stuff, right? Or maybe I'm going to do my other things, right? What is that like amount of time you give it? Is that like a 30-second process? Like I would initially think about it. Or is it like a, 5-10 minute thing? You're just kind of seeing what comes to mind, writing it down, and then reflecting on how to make it possible? Or is it just really sitting in that moment of I'm almost envisioning like a experience of you visioning it. So you're just like envisioning yourself like, at the beach house or like walking up to the door on the beach house and making it sort of an experience. Just curious again what that like amount of time is and what the overall like setting and essentially kind of like outcome is that you do in this kind of journal practice.
Well, I read The Miracle Morning in 2015. And at the time, my kids were 3 and 5, and I was working my butt off 24/7. My business was booming, but I was crumbling in overwhelm and becoming a shell of myself. And a friend of mine recommended The Miracle Morning. And I always joke that I nearly slapped him because I was like, you're telling me to wake up early? I have kids waking me up in the middle of the night. I'm exhausted all the time. But I decided I was desperate and I was feeling really anxious for the first time in my life. So I decided to try The Miracle Morning, and it totally changed my life. And interestingly enough, for the next 4 or 5 years, I was, initially consistently inconsistent with it. But I noticed that when I did it for a period of time, a couple days or weeks, I noticed that I was more calm, more energized, more clear-headed, more focused, more present, more productive. And so over time, I became more and more committed to that morning routine. But even then, if I'm honest, it was still kind of a to-do on my to-do list. It was like, check the box. I did the 10-minute daily calm meditation. Check the box. I journaled. Check the box. I read 10 pages. Like it was kind of like perfunctory. And then in 2020, when we went on this road trip, we were in a tiny RV. It was like a 23-foot, no slides. It's not a home on wheels. My daughter was sleeping in the dinette converted to the bed. My son was above the cab, my husband and I in the back. So I couldn't get up and do my morning routine before everyone woke up because it would mean like getting out of the camper in the dark and, at a campground. I'm like, I just didn't want to do that. So I kind of forced myself to chill out. And I read a book called The Surrender Experiment and decided that I was going to surrender. And I came up with a word for that year was unbecoming, rushed and unbecoming stressed and unbecoming overconnected and overcommitted and overwhelmed in order to create space for the feelings of ease and present moments and clarity and focus and energy and all the things. And then I've barely missed a day of my morning routine, and I'm not so perfunctory about it. I actually recognize it's the most important time of my day. So I never take an appointment before 10 a.m. And from when I get up in the morning to when the kids get out the door, I have potentially 2 or 3 hours that is there for white space for me to take as much time to read, reflect, vision, plan, etc. And then to your question about then do I start thinking about how to make it happen? Not so much. It's interesting because the hustle culture tells you go make it happen, right? Like, so your analytical brain is on overdrive all the time, thinking. And it's like, that's how I operated for a very long time. And like Benjamin Hardy talks about in The Gap and the Gain, it was like every time I achieved a goal, it was cool for a minute. And then the goalpost moved again. And we're in this constant state of unfulfilled because we're now looking at the next horizon we're trying to get to. And so I've been doing the work to reverse engineer and move from making it happen to letting it happen. And things continue to, like, it's two different vibrations or approaches to the same destination. So the goals continue to be achieved, the vision continues to become realized, but the energy and the journey towards it is much more relaxed and easy, which I think is the feeling we imagine we all have access to and have permission to feel once we've achieved the goal. But most often we feel it for a moment and then we get frustrated that we're not at the next milestone yet, right? So it's interesting. There's a lot, it's been like a real journey of many years of striving and reading how-to books. And then most recently, the last 4 years, reading more spiritual, where spiritual meets business or business meets spirituality or whatever you want to call it. And this process of unbecoming. And it's been a nice way to approach the achievement of the vision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of a book I've read, because I've read, a number of those that you listed, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And that really, especially the third section, really
Love that.
like speeding, just anyways, trying to find the closest line, in a checkout thing, like, oh, that one's close. Like, let's go do that. And so it was very tactical and eye-opening in different ways, for sure. And taking Sundays to, Sabbath and really just reflect and be and, what have you. And then, continue on and intentionally have reset moments instead of this idea of, pausing of sorts. Oh yeah, I'm going to take, 2 hours here. But like, hey, us as a family, I think he talks about either himself or another family like has like their Sabbath of sorts is like Saturday. And so like as a family, they're like, hey, we're just going to like do calm, nice things. We have a pizza party, movie night, like kind of stuff. And it's not a chaotic, hectic sort of thing. Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It's like, hey, not on Saturday, like type thing. And so I think it's because he was a pastor. This person was a pastor. So that's why they couldn't do Sundays working. But just that idea of like reset, not just pause type day or even just like moments has been a good perspective piece. And so these moments through time, so I think it's absolutely imperative to unbecoming is almost another shirt I feel like I should buy or make or something. But I appreciate the perspective. What would you say, so this is like the guide to joy, like what would you say would be like the mindset mantra, like quote, something or other that like you would put in the guide for your experience on this kind of path?
I like to replace I wish I could with I've decided to, and then see what comes up. So to say I wish I could usually is followed by but, right? I wish I could do that, but, and then whatever follows but is fear. So it's okay to get intimate with your fears and it's okay to accept that they exist within us as human beings. So sometimes I will journal it out. Like I wish I could do this, but, and then I write it all out. And then I replace that with I decided to, and then I don't need to know how before I can decide. So like if you gave me your address in Austin and I put it in the Jeep, it's going to show me a number of different ways to get there and different amounts of time. If I fly or I take a train or I drive or I ride my bike or I walk, like it doesn't really matter how long it takes for me to get to your house, because once I put the destination in, as long as I aim for it, I'm inevitably going to get there. And if I don't have your address, there's a lot of running in circles I'd be doing in Austin.
Yeah, sure.
Trying to find your address, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so that's just a little piece of advice for anybody and for myself again and again is when I catch myself in a wish is say, what if I just decided to do that? And then how do I seek out people that have been there before that remind me of my future, get in the room with them in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And typically I'll be able to absorb some ideas, strategies, next steps, right? But again, I don't need to see your house to decide I'm going there. It's going to be a little while before I am standing at your doorstep. But once I've decided, I know I'll get there.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's an incredible reminder, especially with, what we're talking about in terms of permission, not being hurried, being unbecoming of sorts. So yeah, really appreciate your insights. Where's the best place for people to connect with you? Because I know you have like digital courses, you're a published author, you have coaching and a number of other things you're working on or have done and continue to do.
Yeah, so I love connecting with people. I love hearing from people. I love when I reach out to somebody and they respond to me in general. Like, I'm so glad you responded to me. So
there you go.
Podcast and I want to meet you and you're going to be on my show. And it's really cool that so I always tell people to reach out to me, follow me and DM me on Pursuing Freedom Official on Instagram. If you found something of value here, you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can email me, Erin@pursuingfreedom.com. That's the name of my podcast. If you're curious about what I'm putting out there, which is primarily for real estate professionals, agents and lenders and investors. But I imagine some of your listeners would probably find some cool content there, including the future episode with you. Yeah. So yeah, I always love when people, I know you know what I'm talking about, Paul, where we put these podcasts out there and you're always wondering, is anybody even listening? And so if somebody sends me a message, I heard your interview with so-and-so or whatever, and I had this takeaway, or I had this moment, or I liked what you said about such and such. It truly is the thing that makes my day. So I always invite people, please reach out to me. I just love hearing from you, and I love making this big world, a smaller place.
Yeah, it reminds me of this idea of it's social media. And so it's meaning to say, like, I've seen people in person. They're like, oh, hey, man, I haven't seen you in a while. Like, you've been doing some great stuff. Like, I really like this. And it's like, okay, like, that is great. And like, comment, share, describe, like, type stuff. So I would just encourage, others, because that's one thing that I've been, aiming to do is like be more social, not just, oh yeah, cool, and then move on, or not even like something. Like someone has spent the time to give you that value. If you found value, out of it, share, why, and, interact with it, kind of thing. But yeah, no, very much looking forward to continue to, just getting to know each other and have cross paths in the complete unknown. But thanks for coming on and sharing.
Yes, thanks for having me, Paul. It's been great.
If something resonated with you today, share it with a friend. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, leave a 5-star review. It's one of the best ways that I can know what and how I'm doing is being beneficial to you and your life as a listener. Thanks for joining. We'll see you on next episode.